Morning, everyone. Welcome to the licensing hearing, 22nd of March 2020. My name is Councillor Beston, and I will be chairing the meeting this morning. Do two quick introductions. The licensing subcommittee. To my right, Councillor Jonathan Bacon and Councillor Debbie Andre. Before I go into our agenda and further introductions, I'll just do a quick housekeeping. So mobile phones switched off or silent, please. There are no planned fire drills this morning. If you do hear the fire drill or the fire bell, so please treat that as a real emergency and evacuate the building via the nearest safe escape route. Nearest escape route is via the stairs to your left, leave the council chamber, public gallery. Exit via the door at the back of the building, across the inner car park, the evacuation point, pavement opposite the police station. The lifts can't be used in the event of an emergency. Please do not re-enter the building. Safe to do so. Fine. Thank you. So I'll do some introductions around the table. Left is the applicant, Mrs. Carly Sykes. We have Sarah McDonald, Services Officer. And we have Gurnard Services. To my right, Andrea Ball, Assistant Licensing Manager. Kevin Winchcombe, Licence and Business Services Manager. And Mark Wooten, Environmental Health. Ian Thornton, Island Roads. We have objectors here this morning. Mr. Richard Councillor Hollis. Gary and Debbie Hall. Margarita Teague and Councillor Paula. Very much. So I'll go straight into our agenda items, which is the, I beg your pardon, so apologies and changes to membership. I'm unaware there are none. Thank you. Item 2, just minutes of the last meeting to confirm a true record of the minutes of the meeting held on the 13th of November. I could have a proposer and seconder. Thank you, Jonathan Bacon and Councillor Andre. I'm quite happy to sign those minutes. I wasn't present, but both Councillor Andre and Bacon were, so more than happy to sign those as a true record. Item 3, declarations of interest. To invite members to declare any interest they may have in the matters on the agenda. There are no declarations of interest. Item 4, urgent business. There are no urgent business here. Item 5, reports of the Strategic Director of Community Services, which is an application for a street trading consent for the Salty Siren at Princess Esplanade, Gurnard, Isle of Wight. So I will turn to Andrea Ball to summarise the report.
Thank you. The committee will be aware that this hearing was originally scheduled to be held on the 12th of March 2024. Prior to that arranged committee, an objector submitted a document which he requested was read out in the event that he could not attend the committee meeting. The objection raised points which go to the heart of the validity of the application and which are equally relevant to the committee meeting today. Whilst the objector is here today, in the interest of transparency, I feel it's important before commencing with my opening statement to address each of the perceived discrepancies. Number one, the objector states that the application form requires the plan submitted with the application to show the location of premises selling the same or similar goods. The plan submitted with this application does show the location of Plaza Ices, but does not identify the little coffee bike. It is the licensing authority's position that the lack of identification of the location of the little coffee bike does not invalidate the application. Need and competition are not relevant factors to be considered. Licensing officers and Island Roads officers are aware of this trader having consent to operate and their location. Discrepancy number two relates to the fact that the box marked permission of the landowner on the application form has not been ticked. Whether or not that is the case, the licensing authority are happy that the applicant sought permission from Island Roads on behalf of the Highways Authority as the landowner prior to making her application, and the email confirming that she has permission to use both proposed locations was received by the licensing team on the 17th of January. Officers will always advise applicants that this element of an application must be satisfied at the time of submission of an application if the landowner is a third party and not the Isle of Wight Council. In these instances, we will not proceed with an application until landowner's permission has been obtained. In all other instances, consent to use the land, if not already obtained before the application is submitted, will be identified during the consultation process with Island Roads. Discrepancy number three suggests that paragraph 63 of the report, whereby the street works manager for Island Roads has provided a quote in which he estimates the footway being 4 metres wide, is an error. The objector states that the footway is actually 3 metres 30 centimetres. I too have measured the pavement and I can confirm that it is 3 metres 30 centimetres wide, but I draw your attention to the fact that Island Roads confirmed their measurements to be an estimate of the footway. Discrepancy number four relates to visual impact, and the objector alleged that the consultation invited comments on a horse box and that after the consultation ended, the proposed trading unit was changed to the catering pod that all parties can see in the papers in front of you today. This is not accurate. The applicant, within 5 days of the consultation period commencing, notified us of the change and provided photos and dimensions of the pod, which were then circulated to responsible authorities. The photos were also available to view online, and the original photos of the horse box were removed. All parties were therefore consulted on the application now before you for determination. I can also confirm that I have physically seen the pod. Finally, it was brought to our attention that location 1 and location 2 identified on the plan fall within separate town and parish council boundaries with the preferred location 1 falling clearly within Gurnard Parish Council District and location 2 falling just within the boundary of Cowes Town Council. I can confirm that this was an oversight and that Cowes Town Council were not notified of the consultation period. This has now been remedied and a consultation has taken place. A response has been provided via the clerk and these comments have been shared with all parties today. You will note that these comments have been redacted, as some comments relate to matters that cannot be considered in this determination. Councillor Hollis, the Chair of the Planning and Licensing Committee for Cowes Town Council, has attended the meeting today and would like to make further comments in respect to the generator. In respect of these and all other matters raised, I can confirm that the licensing authority is satisfied that this is a valid application which can be determined today, and I will therefore move on to my opening statement. An application for a street trading consent was submitted by Carly Sykes on the 22nd of January 2024, requesting permission to trade as the Salty Siren at Prince's Esplanade, Gurnard, Isle of Wight. The plan submitted with the application shows the proposed trading location. 2 locations were selected in order of preference. Officers from Island Roads, acting on behalf of the Highways Authority as the landowners, have granted permission for trading to take place and have raised no objection to either location. Items that are proposed to be sold include ice creams, lollies, tea and coffee, slushies, popcorn, pre-packaged baked goods, along with buckets, spades, crabbing nets and beach shoes. Initially, the applicant intended to trade from a converted horse box. However, she has since purchased a catering pod. Specific dimensions and a photograph of the pod can be found at Appendix 3. Mrs. Sykes has applied for a 12-month consent commencing on the 20th of May 2024 for trading each day between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. Monday to Saturday and from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. on Sunday. If a consent is granted, the catering pod will be removed at the end of each day's trading. The consultation ran from the 23rd of January until the 12th of February. Responsible authorities have raised no objections to this application. 19 representations were received from other persons. A number of representations have referenced competition and the issue of need, along with other matters that cannot be considered in line with the street trading policy. These comments have been redacted from representations, and members should be mindful that these matters cannot be referred to during the hearing or considered when determining this application. Cowstown Council have also now made comment in respect of the generator. Specifically, comments that can be considered are those relating to public safety, the prevention of crime and disorder, the prevention of nuisance, visual impact, and the protection of children from harm. In respect to the prevention of nuisance, concerns have been raised that residents may be affected by fumes, noise, and vibrations associated with the generator. They also state that there is a risk from chemicals leaking from a flooded generator if it becomes wet, which may cause damage to public footpaths and wildlife. There is also a perception that litter will increase and that the applicant may dispose of wastewater into the sea. Concerns have also been raised that the trader will take up valuable parking spaces, and this may lead to an increase in illegal parking or the blocking of residents' drives. There are concerns around public safety and the protection of children from harm, particularly in relation to children wandering off to buy items on their own or crossing the road, as well as congestion being caused by queues of people blocking the pavement. In respect to crime and disorder, concerns have been raised that if the trading unit is left in situ overnight, that it could attract criminal behaviour. This is no longer a relevant concern, as if consent is granted, it will be a requirement for the pod to be removed after each day's trading. In respect of visual impact, concerns were initially raised that a converted horse box was not in keeping with the area and the unit will block the views of local residents. The horse box has now been replaced with a catering pod, details of which have been provided to all responsible authorities and objectors. Following the consultation, the applicant was provided with a copy of the redacted representations, to which she provided a response specifically in relation to the concerns over the generator. This was forwarded to all of the objectors. A copy of her response can be found at Appendix 5. Details of the specific concerns raised by the objectors were also sent to Environmental Health Department and Island Roads. It is common practice to consult officers from relevant services further when a number of objections have been raised to an application, as these officers are qualified to assess the likelihood of the concerns raised and the impact of any such outcomes. Senior Environmental Health Practitioner Mr. Mark Wotton has carried out a site visit and assessed the location and the specifications of the generator in relation to noise, fumes, safety, control of noise at work and vibrations. His additional comments can be found at Appendix 6. Mr. Wotton is here today, along with Mr. Ian Thornton, the Streetworks Manager from Island Roads, in order to answer any questions you may have. Contact was also made with the Isle of Wight Council Service Manager for Climate and Environment in order to obtain his views regarding concerns raised around the environmental impact of the generator. Details of the generator provided by the applicant were sent to him, and in response he stated that the Isle of Wight Council advocates the use of renewable sources of energy where it is safe and practicable to do so over fossil fuel generators. We would encourage business to ensure that their environmental impact is reduced to so far as reasonably practicable and look to use hybrid systems and the best available technology to reduce the environmental impact from their business. They, the applicant, are using the best available technology with the use of a low emission generator, and they are looking to get solar panels in the future, which shows a commitment to going carbon neutral in the future, which is what we are looking for as a local authority. Finally, on the 11th of March, some late evidence was received by way of an email from Miss Kate Taylor, who has written in support of the application. Advice was sought around this submission, and subsequently the email was circulated to all parties at that hearing prior to its adjournment on the 12th of March and has been provided to Councillor Bacon this morning. Officers have also been made aware of some support for this application across social media. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will at this point invite the subcommittee members if they have any questions. Councillor Andre? Thank you.
I do have a couple of questions just of clarification at this point for the applicant, but I think it might be better to proceed and then they may well be answered
Yeah,
anyway.
just to be clear, if there is any questions to Andrea Ball. Okay, thank you very much. I will turn to the applicant, Carly Sykes. This is your opportunity to present your case.
Okay. Hello, my name is Carly and this is my business partner, Lindy. We are locals to Cowes and Gurnard. We've always spent summer days along Gurnard Front, one of our favourite places on the island. I have thought for a few years now that Gurnard is lacking a little beach hut, something that sells essentials, things that would benefit everyone. For my business partner, Lindy, it was her dad who inspired her. He owns most of the land along the front and one of his goals was to have a beach shop along the Esplanade. With his passing, Lindy wanted to honour this, and that's how we became business partners. Our main goal is to bring something, not just for tourists in the summer months, but something for everyone all year round. We believe in using high quality, locally produced products at great value, something for everyone in all walks of life. We want to pride ourselves on affordability in this cost of living crisis and bring some tradition back. We chose our location due to being within walking distance to the beach, but not close enough to disturb residents. We have tried to be as mindful as possible to others and have really thought about how we can be as eco-friendly and green as possible, using all eco-friendly packaging, low-powered and self-powered equipment, and low kilowatt dual-fueled generator that runs from LPG gas, which is over 50% cleaner than a standard generator. I would also like to add, although I am aware that the amount of complaints and positive comments aren't factors in this decision, I would just like to add that since this has become public knowledge on Facebook, County Press and Island Radio, there have been over 100 positive and supportive comments on the first day alone. Unfortunately, it does seem that people weren't aware that they could email in support as well as complaints. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Is there anything further you wish to add? Thank you. So again, I will invite members of the subcommittee to ask any questions. Councillor Andre, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just for clarification, I understand that the intention is to remove the pod after trading every day and bring it in. Is that the case?
That's correct.
Also, I note from the first and second choice of location, can you just give me your rationale as to why you've put them in that order?
So location 1 is what we wanted. That's what, that's where we were aiming to be. Location 2 was, to me, it looked like you had to put a location 2 as a backup. So that's why we chose that location, because there's not really anywhere else along that front that you can be. You can't be any closer to Gurnard. You can't go past the coffee bite that way. And I didn't want to be right next to everybody else. So obviously our location 1 is because for us, we wanted to give something to the people that are coming from the beach end. And that's why we chose where we did.
Of course, yeah.
It's only that I know one of the comments in terms of access, which I think is relevant here. The location of the second choice seems to have more available space. We've heard location 1 is 3.3 meters wide. Do we have a width of the second location choice? Because it appears that that's on an apron.
Any of the regulatory bodies able to confirm?
Yeah, I can answer that in some ways if it helps and I believe that Mrs. Ball was going to confirm this in her summing up, that the requirements under the street furniture policy and regulations that we implement and has been agreed with Island Roads is that the necessary gap required for the safe movement of people with prams and mobility scooters is 1.5 metres, if that helps your determination.
Very much. Thank you. Are there any further questions? Councillor Bacon, thank you.
Thank you. I think the three questions I have. First, it's a question about the pod. You usually submitted pictures of the pod and the dimensions. All the pictures show it closed. So I mean, if you could describe what is revealed when the lid is opened, but that relates to a particular question I have. Will all the various items you referred to, because you referred to beach equipment and so on, are they all stored, displayed and for sale from within the pod, or is there a plan to put anything on the pavement?
No, nothing on the pavement, in the pod. We won't necessarily have all of it on display. We would have it, put away, but we'll have advertisements for, buckets and spades and what we do. We're not having anything on the pavements. And as for the hatch, the whole front opens up.
Yeah.
I think Andrea might have a picture of that somewhere.
I did take some photos the other day, so I can to get it out determinations if that helps, or I can just.
It was more concern about whether the pavement, anything was.
Oh yeah, no, nothing on the pavement.
Okay. So thank you for that. Second question of interest, but I think it is relevant. There was a reference to energy moving to solar potentially. What could you give a little more detail? How, when are you hoping to do that? Will the solar panels you're planning again affect the appearance, particularly of what we've seen?
Once we get to the stage where we can afford to buy something with the solar panels, we would have to upgrade the trailer because it's a small pod. You can't fit on the top of that the amount of solar panels that you need. So that would be something that we would all upgrade the whole thing in the future. But for now, obviously, that's why we've chosen the best generator we can that runs on the LPG gas. So there's none of this spillage or refueling at the destination or anything like that.
Okay, and one last question. Again, apologies if I missed this in the papers. Is this application of this proposal to be your only trading area, or are you looking to trade in other places? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just a couple of points from me, if you don't mind. So just looking at the pod itself, and I'm assuming the upper panel would open upwards and out, so there'd be no restrictions as regards to pedestrians and that kind of thing. Okay, great. And the other point was the pod will be attached to the vehicle at all times. There will be a gap between the vehicle and the pod, i.e. where it connects.
Yes.
Is that recognised as a trip hazard? Is there anything that you can do to mitigate people trying to step over where it's connected between the vehicle?
I don't think anyone would try and step over. It's such a small little, it's got obviously the metal bit of the framework that attaches to the car. So there wouldn't, unless someone was, trying to shimmy between the car and the trailer, and it's not. They wouldn't just think, oh, there's a gap, I could go through there. There's nothing that they could trip on.
Okay, thank you very much. I will now turn to the relevant authorities to present their case. So Mark Wotton from Environmental Health, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. As our sort of my previous email submission says, initially Environmental Health responded with a no adverse comment, no objection to this application. Generally speaking, street trading consents, I can't think of a situation where we've actually had noise issues associated with generators for any other concession. But we've looked at the various, in light of the objections, we've looked at the various different aspects to the objections, and we've just got some commentary in relation to those different aspects, which will hopefully be of use to members. We've looked at the proposed trading hours, and we don't have any concerns about those. They're not particularly sensitive in any way. We've looked at the noise level from the generator. The manufacturer's data says that's a measurement of 58 decibels at 7 meters from the unit. That equates a distance of 50 meters, which is approximately the distance to the nearest residential noise sensitive property. You'd be looking at a level of around 41 decibels at that point. That is pretty much identical, one within a decibel, to the background noise level that I've measured along the front there. Generally speaking, the noise that characterises the background was from the sea, the wave impact on the shore, frequent passing traffic, pedestrians, bird songs, intermittent aircraft. I think practically in sort of non-decibel terms, I think the generator noise would be audible outside at the nearest residential premises, but we don't think it would be so loud as to constitute a public nuisance. Also on the noise side of things, those figures in comparison to the background don't take into account the any attenuation provided by the unit itself or the weather protective enclosure, which I understand is going to be used when the generator's in operation. Moving on to fumes, we don't have any concerns in relation to the actual concession items being sold themselves. We don't think they're going to cause any problem to residents. We note that the generator is going to be operated on liquid petroleum gas, which is a comparatively cleaner fuel than petrol or diesel. And again, we don't think, given the separation distance, I don't think there will be any adverse impact in relation to fumes from the generator on any residential premises. I know that safety of the generator was mentioned, and again, we don't have any concerns in that respect. It is going to have the weather enclosure to protect it. It is to a degree sort of intrinsically safe and can withstand sort of minor sort of inputs of liquids and that kind of thing. So provided it's checked and maintained regularly, we don't have any concerns on the safety aspect. With regard to noise at work, which was mentioned, the 58 decibels at 7 meters equates to, if you were to stand right next to the generator a meter away, a level of 75 decibels, which is below any threshold within the noise at work, control of noise at work regulations. So there would be no requirement for any operator to be wearing any ear protection, ear defenders, anything like that. And lastly, the vibration, there's no information given by a portable, by the manufacturer, but I would expect the portable generator, if it does vibrate, which it probably will, I would not expect any of that to be transferred into the ground to any extent that it would be detectable at any nearby residential premises. And the only thing not within my that submission was that if you were to look at the first and the second choice options, the second choice option is approximately 190 metres away from the nearest residential property, and I think it would probably be any generator noise, if it were to be at that point, would probably be inaudible completely at any residential premises. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So again, will invite committee to ask any questions to Mr. Wootton. No, there are no questions. Just one from me then. You spoke about the shroud to the generator that could be applied to protect the unit itself from the weather. When that shroud is, when that shroud is applied over that generator unit, that in itself could reduce decibel output. Okay, thank you very much. Again, so I'll turn to Mr. Ian Thornton from Island Roads, please. Thank you.
Yeah, good morning. When we look at applications for street trading, we are looking at the impacts that it would have for users of the highway. So it is for the impact it will have on vehicular traffic and for pedestrian traffic going past. In this location, the Esplanade along there, we don't consider has an impact for vehicle traffic because the space it would occupy is areas that are normally used for vehicles parking. So the space it would occupy there makes no difference to me. And that's why the comment I had was that it faced going towards cows, so that actually the lights that show on the back of the trailer are the red reflectors and things that you would normally expect to see, and not have it facing in the wrong direction in effect on that. So that was the comment we had. For pedestrian side of things, the Esplanade itself is very wide, and I apologise for overestimating the width of it down there. But when you're looking at that there, we always like to try and maintain 1.5 metres for passing pedestrians, so that if you've got people walking in opposite directions, if there are wheelchairs or buggies being used, there is space for people still to get past each other. And in looking at this, we're going, there is sufficient width there for people to safely get past walking in 2 ways, and people be able to be queuing up to be able to buy any purchases. So for that, I wouldn't perceive there to be any problems. I can't say which way people would queue. They might queue across the footway there, but generally people seem to go one side or the other. And if it was in the way people equally queuing, then move out the way. So for a highways perspective, I don't see that as an issue. We normally ask, and it becomes standard conditions, that if there is a spillage or something like that, that then the applicant would go out and clear that up as quickly as possible, so that for ourselves, we don't have something on the pavement there that would cause a slip or a trip hazard to some of them that could cause a problem in the future. So that aspect of it all for us, we're quite happy with the application as presented to us, and either location really does not make a great deal of difference to me, because in that sense, the use of the highway is the same on either location for me.
Thank you very much. So again, I'll turn to my subcommittee. There are no questions. No, thank you very much. So it's the opportunity for other persons to present their case. So looking at the objectors, so if I could turn to Councillor Richard Hollis, please. I'm happy to take that in any order. If you wish to go first, that's fine. Or if you'd like to hand over to Gary Hall, that's absolutely fine. Okay, let's turn to Gary Hall then. This is your opportunity, Gary. Thank you.
I think they were very important to be addressed. But I'd like to talk about the generator. Mr. Wotton has spoke about the fumes and emissions, but he hasn't spoke about the fuel. In the report, it says it's a dual fuel generator. So if you don't mind, I'll just take a minute on that. I can think of nowhere on the Isle of Wight, or indeed anywhere, there is currently an LPG oblique petrol generator and situated and running on the public highway, not contained within a unit, 8 hours a day, 7 days a week, 52 weeks a year, causing potential public nuisance, serious public safety and environmental issues. The technology exists now to eliminate all these problems. There are other traders on the Isle of Wight, including ourselves, using only solar and battery power. The environmental officer states in his report, quote, "The proposed generator is dual fuel using both petrol and LPG gas." The Hampshire and Isle of Wight Fire Brigade, who have to attend every event, ask traders to fill in the risk assessment. One of the things it says, "Are you aware that petrol generators are not permitted?" And that's from the Hampshire and Isle of Wight Fire Brigade. I'm surprised not to be used on any island show or event. They are prohibited, and each trader must sign to say they understand this. Why is a petrol oblique LPG generator even being considered on our seafront? Hampshire and Isle of Wight Fire and Rescue Service go on to say LPG cylinders must be stored in an upright area and out of reach of the public. How will this be possible on the pavement, which is 3 meters and 3 centimeters wide? Their guidance stipulates a whole range of rules when using LPG. I'm disappointed to see this hasn't been addressed. If you decide to approve this application today, it's a massive step backwards in the Isle of Wight Council's climate change strategy. In 2007, the Isle of Wight Council signed the Nottingham Declaration. As part of this declaration, you signed to, quote, "reassure residents you are taking climate change seriously," and pledged, quote, "to improve the quality of life for residents." In 2019, the Isle of Wight Council declared a climate emergency and there's a target to achieve net zero by 2030. According to your website, I think it might now be 2040. Only this week, the Isle of Wight Council leader, Phil Jordan, referring to the new electric car chargers, said, quote, "We need to decarbonise emissions as rapidly as possible." Other councils as near as Portsmouth, for an abundance of reasons, in my Annex 2, would not even consider this application. It would have been rejected at application stage. Hampshire and Isle of Wight Fire Service will not accept a petrol generator. I feel that for this reason alone, it should have been rejected at application stage. If you decide to pass this application, I feel an explanation to the residents is required how it will improve their quality of lives, having a fossil fuel generator chugging away close to their homes or along our much loved seafront. Please do let your pledges be empty promises when making your decision, as the Isle of Wight Council's pledge to reach net zero is still a live pledge. I had some other points I wanted to make, and it was more about procedure points, but I think that's covered for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will turn to Andrea if I can, but my understanding is that all responsible authorities have had all the information, they have been consulted, and the fire and rescue services do not wish to make any representation on this particular application. Councillor Bacon, thank you.
Thank you. So the same point, Mr. Hall has referred to a form which we've not seen. It would be useful to know what that form is.
So this is,
It sounds as if it relates to specific booking for events, in which case I'm not sure of its relevance, but it would be useful to know a little bit more about it rather than making references to something we haven't seen.
as a copy.
What is it?
Oh, sorry. So this is for, if you attend any show or event or you're event organizer, you have to fill in a trader's risk assessment. This is an ongoing policy, and I'd imagine, that's why I say I'm disappointed Fire and Rescue didn't respond. It would also, in fact, be more relevant on a pavement. So they do not accept petrol generators, full stop. And
Thank you. I
perhaps
just wanted to know what the
clarification.
form was. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. Councillor Richard Hollis, please. Thank you very much for that. There is just one point on what councillor Hollis picked up on, and that's regards to, I'll just need some clarification if I can, as regards to the designated parking areas. That is a valid point. If at some point that particular space is not available to the applicant, assuming that the licence is passed today, what are the possible implications for the licence holder being able to park at that particular spot? Can anyone pick up on that for me?
Yeah, the understanding and the arrangement would be no different to what we have with Plaza Ices, and that is that if Mr. and Mrs. Hall were to turn up along the seafront at the yellow triangle, which is the sort of marker that we've agreed, and there was someone parked there, they would simply move on to the next available spot, and it would be no different for Mrs. Sykes.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Garr.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, and just a further point of clarification to add to the point made by the Licensing Authority, which is that the street trading consent regime authorises the undertaking of street trading. It doesn't guarantee the opportunity to do it. So if there were no spaces available, that is a matter ordinarily between the person undertaking the street trading and the landowner. In this case, it's slightly more complicated because it's a highway, and so you'd have the situation where the consent, if granted, simply regularises the use, doesn't guarantee the ability to do it. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, councillor Bacon. Thank you.
It's very much the same point, but just so further clarification of the clarification. Mrs. Bull, you referred to moving on to the next available spot. Is there a limit to that? If the cars are nose to tail, they along the entire area of the image we have, is there a point at which you have to say there are no spaces, I cannot trade?
We could
That's helpful, and I think I should just make one further point. I very much hear what Councillor Hollis says about arising out of my question in relation to solar panels. It was a matter of interest, and it's not obviously what we're determining today. So I don't want you to go away thinking I'm thinking there's a massive solar panel factory coming out into this. I know what we're talking about. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll ask Councillor Andre to come in, and then Mr. Hall. Thank you.
Thank you. Just a further point of clarification. In Mr. Wooden's detailed submission in our appendix and in your submission here, you quoted decibel levels. Councillor Hollis referred to if the wind was in a certain direction, that could raise the decibel levels. A, do you believe that to be the case? And if so, would it be likely to raise the decibels above a level that the sort of levels that you quoted?
Thank you. Councillor Hollis rightly says that any noise can be carried in the direction of the wind. If you have no wind, completely still day, the noise will propagate uniformly in all directions. If you are, for sake of argument, if you had a prevailing southwesterly wind, it would carry the noise away from the residential properties. In this case, if you had a northeasterly wind, it could carry the noise towards the residential properties. So there will be some variations in how loud the noise is at the residential properties. I think in this case, the prevailing wind would be from the southwest, so it would be carrying any noise away from the residential properties, but there will clearly be occasions where you will get a northeasterly wind where it would be carrying it towards residential properties.
Thank you. Further question.
But would that, are you able to say whether or not you feel that would take the decibel level? You may not be able to answer this, but because it's not a sort of exact science, but would-
I would think it would
would
be.
it still be within acceptable parameters?
I think it's unlikely to be problematic. You would be looking at the minority of the time, given my understanding of the prevailing wind direction in that area.
Thank you very much. I'll ask Mr. Hall to come in. Just for clarification, it wouldn't be an advantage if it's a repeat of any objection that you've already spoken about. So, okay.
I think it's a very good point that somebody brought up about the overlap of where we're allowed to park, because the agreement we have is between the two yellow markers, isn't it? Where this application, location 2 is actually also in that location. It is between the two yellow markers. There's also another street trader who must have the same flexibility, just a little bit further. So I think we've asked in the past if we could mark out our spots, but I fully understand it was not considered not suitable because we're not there all the time. So there's got to be some flexibility. And so I just thought I'd point out that where we are between the two markers, it's also one of the places that the applicant wants to be. All right. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Mrs. Carly Sykes would like to.
Yeah, I would just like to say, obviously that's location 2, but this, really, this application was for location 1, so that would take that out. And as when it goes to the gas cylinders, if you was to look at the picture, there's a little barrel bit on the back, and that's actually where the gas bottles sit, and it's all enclosed, it's all hidden away, so that's actually not anywhere near the public. And in regards to I know it's not relevant, but if we were to do events, it has an electrical hookup anyway, so we wouldn't be using a generator, we would be using that. And whether you get a diesel or a petrol one, it's a small little cylinder in the thing, which is literally to start the machine up, to push the power button, and then everything switches over to the LPG gas. Just thought that might clarify some points. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, yeah. Can I turn to Margarita T, please? Thank you.
Of which 13, I think, from Solent Shores have objected, but unfortunately none of them could be here today because of work, because of commitments with children at school on the mainland, some on holiday and some on the high seas. And unfortunately, the person who was coming with me, who really wanted to be here, her husband was taken to hospital last night, so she was unable to be here. I am the nearest resident to this proposal. I live on the ground floor flat in the corner of Solent Shores. I live here 24/7. I rarely go away because of my age, and as a retiree, spend most of my time in my much loved apartment and adjoining garden. I bought the flat 7 years ago for my retirement, and quite frankly, I'm devastated by this, completely devastated. I acknowledge it's Friday and you all want to get home, but there are some points contained within the report which I found misleading and which need to be considered, I think, very carefully. Some of them possibly have been addressed already. I am told I am prevented from speaking or commenting on a lot of matters because of an old policy, quoted 2004, which I know has been revised. Therefore, some specific objections are not being lodged, and licensing does not fully consider the impact on us all. The policy decision, which may permit potential trading posts all the way down the Esplanade, from Cowes to Gurnard, which is the only green walk, run, ride, jog, whatever you have, in cows, valued by huge numbers of people and visitors, will ultimately destroy the quiet, tranquil nature of the area unless it is curtailed. Street policy, trading policy 2022 states on page 3 of 12, a balance must be struck and relevant views taken into account between legal objectives of applicants and the desires of the population as a whole. In particular, those living, working, and engaged in normal activity in the area. I feel very strongly about this. With reference to this, my letter on page 28, Appendix 4, states that this is not the right location and that it is too close to Solent Shores residences. My comments include particularly public nuisance and safety, litter, congestion, and the inappropriate use of a generator, and are the views expressed I see in whole or part of all the objectors' letters published, of which I didn't actually see any before I put mine in. How can they be ignored? And I note this application has been recommended for authorizing by licensing without any satisfactory acknowledgement of multiple objections, and some details have been in the report are not factually correct. First of all, the exact location is not clarified. Your policy document requires a map to scale 1,000 to 1 to 1,000 with the exact location marked in red ink. It is a very poor plan. There was a discrepancy in the advertising of the location, which seems to have gone unnoticed. The location of the sign posted on the railings, which should mark the exact place, was some 20 or 30 meters west towards Gurnard, towards us, than that marked on the green plan. And I have a photo of this. The actual sign is still there. This appears to have crept in without anyone noticing, despite a visit from a licensing representative who changed, on my request, changed the piece of paper because it had rotted. That is the photograph from my balcony. I don't know whether you can see it, but that is the arrow showing where the. Can you see it? I say that estimate 15 yards, maybe 20. The notice is option 2, near the junction with Egypt Esplanade, I think disappeared quite quickly. And option 2 is never mentioned again in the report, although it is much more suited, and in many ways, it was voted for unanimously over option 1 at the meeting of Gurnard Parish Council, which I attended. In our experience, item 63, which I think Mr. Hall has already mentioned, states Island Road estimates that the pavement is 4 meters wide. I also measured it. It actually measures just 3 meters, a little bit over. In our experience, this shows the footpath does not, down this end, has not sufficient room at peak times, i.e. weekends, holidays and hot weather, and with the number of parked cars, to get past people easily queuing or gathering. And this inevitably forces some to have to go round parked vehicles onto the road to get past. I sit in my flat and I watch this, I observe and I see it over and over again. There is no footpath on the other side of the road. This matter has been totally disregarded in the report. And I don't notice roads obviously don't come down here and see it when it happens. It's not every day. It's not in the winter. But I did take some photographs again on a day in March. And here you will see people walking past. See, one chap's on the road. This is in March. Now, this is a small group. You get much bigger groups than this. This is on the coastal path. You've got visitors. You've got people with multiple dogs. You've got people with children, with bikes, little bikes, with scooters, and all the dogs are on leads. Whilst I appreciate that this trader wanted to set up, it has not been acknowledged that this is an unsuitable place for a static trader, unless there is a space or an apron to facilitate a waiting queue. People don't walk singly, but many in large groups, anything up to 10 or more. And quite often people who are disabled, groups who've come across from the mainland with multiple dogs on leads, children, scooters, elderly, wheelchairs, who usually have somebody accompanying them or somebody pushing them. In 2024, I'll also show you, which is the actual place. Option 1 is here, and that is our block. And that's where I live, and these people are all permanent residents all around here. And you can see where they put the sign. I don't know who put that up. It's also a bit of very rough road there, which has some steps going down to it. It's all broken. And it dips. It's not a very suitable place at all. There's no apron there. And I will show you queuing. This is a photograph of queuing for the ice cream van. They don't queue alongside, they spill onto the apron. This again is in March on a weekday. Multiply that by 10 in the summer. And they're all over, they need that apron. This is option 2. It's on the Cowsbourne Gurnard boundary, and there's an apron there. If this crept down any nearer our flats, which I hadn't heard until this morning, if there isn't a place available, this would be pretty disastrous, frankly. I didn't buy my flat for that. This is the plan, as you've probably seen. I don't call that a proper map. In 2024, it is entirely inappropriate to be authorising any form of generator, let alone in a public place on a public highway, run on fossil fuels of any sort, which is not for essential use, when the whole nation is being obliged to turn against them, and this authorisation has attracted so many objections. The latest Isle of Wight Council advice regarding authorisations and requiring 100% green-powered energy are well advertised. I have heard that neither the pod or equipment have yet been bought, although it said it had in the report. And it is shamefully wrong for the council to go against your own guidance policy. Salty Shores have stated that this generator is only required for a fridge and freezer. But if that is the case, why can they not, like Plaza, operate on solar? Good intentions from the council are not sufficient if there is no strong commitment from those issuing the guidance. Regarding the Environmental Health Officer's report, when referring to the multiple concerns and objections to the use of generators, including at least 2 objections, who have sensitivity to noise and pollution, and I am actually one of those. I'm very sensitive to noise and pollution. I'm chemical sensitive and radiation sensitive and the lot. Inform us that the noise at 50 metres will not be heard inside our homes, making it a possible assumption that we spend our time indoors and we will only notice it outside, when the main characteristics of Solent Shores are its long balconies, wide opening doors and a garden. We're all different and our tolerances are not one size fits all. The resonance and frequency of a constant background noise can be very disturbing to some and is very different from intermittent noise, i.e. traffic passing or an aeroplane overhead. It doesn't all depend on decibels. And so saying, the Mr. Whippy machine, which I've usually used, will also emit a further, I think, 70 decibels through the open window. Finally, bearing in mind this authorization is requesting 7 days a week, 365 days a year for 8 hours a day, starting at 9 o'clock in the morning and on Sundays, allows little let up for residents nearby and will cause a lot of distress. I also note that there is no reference to the ECHR protocol, Article 1, the right to peaceful enjoyment of one's own home and property. This has not been mentioned. It also appears to be glossed over that the type of generator discussed can have safety concern. I'm sorry if you've already dealt with this. If it is not in good working order and fully maintained and caretaken. This is also would be adjacent to a piece of land with TPOs, which is at last beginning to grow and attract wildlife again after being forcefully destroyed, having had a preservation order on it, which Paul Fuller can explain to you, and now awaiting outcome of court proceedings. This land is also full of tinder, which dries out in hot weather and is close to our boundary fence, should there be a fire risk from a spark igniting it. This is not to mention the potential danger, which has already been mentioned to children and passers-by. The use of a generator has raised huge objections and is simply unacceptable to residents, even at 50 metres, for all the reasons they and I have expressed. And I do not believe that when there has been so many objections to a licensing as this, that a decision can proceed until all these comments have been taken fully into account, following our own observations and fully discussed and agreed. It is on fine days in summer with the high pressure, as Councillor Hollis has mentioned, when the prevailing wind is then easterly and will drift in our direction. This is just when we will all want to be outside enjoying the sun, but the noise will prevail. And it combined with the Mr. Whippy machine, I think I've mentioned this, it will put up the decibels. On a fine sunny day, this will be a permanent blight for which we have no redress. Following this decision, this is a permanency we will not be able to comment on again.
Thank you very much. I will turn to Andrea Ball in just one moment, but my understanding is that the majority of the points that you have raised, we have already covered here this morning. But there is a point regarding the location and plan that Margarita T referred to. Would you like just to cover that, and then I'll turn to Carly Sykes?
Yes, Chairman, I can address the point on the plan, Chairman. So I turn, Chairman, to paragraph 7.7 of the Council's policy on street trading, which is on page 7. And at that part, so there's no statutory application form that accompanies this type of street trading. It's a matter for the local authority. Paragraph 7.7 subsection B says plan or plans/maps drawn to scale and showing the exact location and the proximity to nearby retail premises and or other street traders must accompany an application. If a map is not supplied, an inspection of the site may be carried out by the Highways Authority, the cost of which shall be paid by the applicant. I just draw two points from that, Chairman. The first is that there is no scale provided in relation to the necessary maps. And the second one is that even if a map isn't or plan isn't provided, it opens up the application to being assessed by the Highways Authority separately. And I turn to the licensing authority, who I presume were happy with the plan that was provided, but we'll leave that for their comment. Chairman.
Thank you very much.
I can confirm.
Yes, please.
Yep, absolutely. Happy with the plan, and I can confirm that site visits have taken place by myself and Mr. Wootton in relation to comments for the application.
Thank you. I will ask my subcommittee to come in and ask any questions at this point. And then I'll turn to Carly Sykes if there is no further questions. Councillor Bacon, thank you.
I think one point of clarification, it's page 29, the submission that Mr. T put in. I'm struggling to understand the point. It's about a quarter of the way down the page. The subparagraph, the paragraph, sorry, that starts, in addition, the pavement on the opposite side. If I read it out, perhaps you could just clarify it for me, because I'm not sure what the point being made is. In addition, the pavement on the opposite side runs out at my garden boundary, almost opposite the proposed site, and everyone on this side either has to cross over onto the pavement past the proposed trading post or walk on the road. Wasn't quite sure what you were trying to indicate there. I'm struggling to understand how that relates to the proposal that we're considering today. So it's based, it was. So it's, the point is based on the point is based on the assumption that the trading post, as you refer, would be directly opposite that point, whereas in fact it's further down. I see. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Andre, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The objector mentions on page 29 of the appendix with reference to the generator. Now, I know that the applicant states that for 98% of the time, the generator will run on LPG. Can I just confirm whether it's LPG and petrol or LPG and diesel?
You can buy them either way, petrol and diesel. The same company does the same generators. You can pick either or, but that is literally to start the motor up, and then you just switch a switch and everything runs off the LPG.
So can you just confirm you haven't bought the generator yet?
I haven't bought it yet.
Which one would you be intending?
I think it was the petrol one.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Are there any further questions? No. So I'll turn to Councillor Fuller, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Thank you very much, Licensing Committee. I'm here today with two hats on. I'm the local member for Cowes West and Gurnard, and I'm also the local member. I'm also the chairman of Gurnard Parish Council. So what I'm going to try to do is sort of like separate my views as local member and my views as chairman of the parish council. This application was considered by Gurnard Parish Council. We saw a great number of concerns raised by local residents, but I think the one that resonated the most with the parish council was the proximity of the generator to the residents of Solent Shores. Yes, it's 50 metres away, but again, when you're dealing with something that is constantly humming 9 till 5, 7 days a week, potentially 365 days a year. And there's nothing to say that is not going to be the case within this application. It is a concern to the residents. I think most of the residents that have raised concerns are the residents from Solent Shores. Choice one, as far as I am concerned, as local member, would have been a no-no. As far as I'm concerned, the public nuisance that would be occurred by that generator being on at all times would be that constant hum can be a bit irritating, and I'm sure that the residents of Solent Shores would appreciate not having to have that noise right on their doorstep. When it came to the two choices, and I have spoken since to Carly about this, and I know Carly isn't too happy with choice two, but choice 2 did overcome the objections that were raised by the majority of the residents that lived nearby. I think there was, we were quite happy to accept choice 2 as there are no properties nearby and the noise from the generators would be minimalised. And I think that was the view of the parish council, and therefore the parish council did not raise any objection to choice 2. So I was quite happy with that. I think one thing we need to bear in mind is how well used those pavements are. The pavements between Cowes and Gurnard are used for cyclists, young families with cycles, taking their children out, trying to get them to learn to ride bikes. But also there is a scooter bay as well, which is also the other side of Solent Shores. It would be surprising for members of the licensing committee to know that that scooter bay is the second most popular scooter bay across the island, being used by Beryl. So it is well used. The pavements are well used. I know you should be taking scooters on pavements, but yes, I do get a lot of complaints from my residents about scooters mowing people down. So I think there is a public safety view there as well. Just looking elsewhere, one of the things that I was very pleased to hear from the applicant is that the catering pod will be taken away in the evening. I think there was a lot of concern about that aspect of the application, and I thank Carly for doing that. I think one of the other things that we have to think about with Gurnard Seafront is the amount that it floods. If you have a high tide with water coming down off of the recently cold sort of like a green gap between Cowes and Gurnard, the area is very, very subject to flooding. So that is of concern to me. And again, when it does flood, you'll see more people walking on those very lengthy pavements that we have talked about. So again, that is a real issue to me. Again, I was not aware about how much closer the van or the catering pod could be if licensing members did go along with choice 1. It will mean that pod will be less than 50 metres away from the residents that are living nearby. Again, if you get an easterly wind, that hum will be that much louder and it can be irritating. You know, you imagine having that outside your house 7 days a week. During the summer, it's not going to be pleasant. And I think that there is a very, very strong case for public nuisance because of that. That concludes my response as a local member. If there's any questions, I'm quite happy to take those. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fuller. That's very informative. Thank you very much. I'll turn to the subcommittee. Are there any further questions? No questions. Thank you. Okay, so I will turn to the relevant authorities now to sum up. So either Ian Thomas or Mark Wootton, if they have any summing up comments.
Yeah, I'd simply sum up and say that actually from a highways perspective, we have no objections to this application and don't perceive that it would cause a highways issue in them being in that location or either of the two locations.
Thank you. Mr. Wootton.
Thank you, Chair. I think to sum up, I've covered all the different aspects in relation to noise and the fumes and what have you. I think one thing I've not mentioned so far is that if location for any noise from any generator in a street, there is a separate statutory nuisance action that should any issue arise that could be considered and assessed under that. And yeah, I take on board all the comments in relation to proximity to the nearest residential premises, and whilst we don't believe there will be it would amount to a public nuisance at location 1, we obviously can't argue with the fact that the further, if location 2 were to be adopted, that would, I think, eliminate any any possible, as I say, I said previously, I don't think it would be audible at residential properties if that location were chosen. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will turn to the objectors. Now, this is your opportunity to sum up. What I don't really expect is any repetition of any objection. So I will just ask any objector if they wish to sum up at this point. Councillor Hollis, please. Thank you. Mr. Hall.
Just to say, the environmental health officer has just said that he's talked about the noise and the fumes. He hasn't addressed my concerns on the fuel type, which the applicants just confirmed to be petrol, when Hampshire Fire and Isle of Wight Rescue Service do not allow petrol generators. Thank you.
Are there any further summing ups? And sorry, just to interrupt, I'm just mindful of time, so if you could be really brief, that would be helpful.
Frequent, and that area where they put option 1 also floods. Because there's little steps that come over and it'll just creep underneath, and there are no main drains along the Esplanade to take that floodwater away. So if it has any contamination in it from any petrol or diesel, it will go into the sea.
Thank you very much. I'll turn to the applicants now. This is Carly Sykes to sum up, please. Thank you.
Yeah, I would just like to say with location 2, like Gary was saying, that actually goes into his area, which is you know, another reason why really it's location 1 that we want. In regards to the flooding, obviously if it's a really wet, windy day and you know there's flooding, we're not going to be trading on that day anyway, so there'd be no worry of us tonight, you know,
Contaminating the water.
yeah, anything like that. And I hope that I've been able to answer everyone's questions and put people's minds at rest in regard to the issues that have been raised. And I would just like to say that with the land that the lady was talking about, all opposite, again, my business partner owns all of that, so there's not a problem with the land that's adjacent through all the way down there either.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, so I'll turn to Andrea Ball, please, to sum up.
So if I can just start with a few areas of clarification, matters that have come out of the hearing this morning. So I'm looking at the response that was submitted by the fire officer. Having examined the submitted application for the premises and information in our files, I would notify you that Hampshire and Isle of Wight Fire and Rescue Service does not wish to make representations to the licensing authority at this time. Regulatory reform order requires the responsible person to make a suitable and sufficient assessment of the risks to which relevant persons are exposed. So yeah, just confirming they've seen the application, they've looked at the documentation, they had no representations. Number 2, there's been an awful lot of reference to the environmental impact of the generator. Perhaps that was my fault for being overzealous and seeking the climate and environment manager's views, because I seem to have opened up a can of worms. The environmental impact isn't a matter for this application to be determined on. 7.2 of the street trading policy states that when traders are considering purchasing vehicles or equipment, The council encourages them to consider using 100% electric. It doesn't prohibit anything else. And as I say, those comments were sought from the Climate and Environment Manager, and you've had his views on that. In relation to use of scooters and flooding along the Esplanade, that is no more relevant to this application than it is to any other. Congestion, flooding would affect your business just as much, Mr. Hall. So that's not really anything that can be attributed to what we're looking at considering today. The applicant's already confirmed that common sense will be used. If it's flooded, blowing a hoolie, she won't be there. And again, with the photographs of the congested Esplanade, I think it's sort of being made out that this Esplanade is any different to any other across the island. It's not. That is how it's used. Walkers, joggers, dog walkers, you name it. That's why there's a business opportunity there. So on to my actual summing up. You've now had the opportunity to hear from all parties in this matter. Officers from Island Roads and the Environmental Health Department have addressed concerns around nuisance associated with the generator, location and congestion concerns, and the applicant has previously confirmed that no wastewater will be disposed of on site and that the generator will have a weatherproof case around it. In respect to the concerns that have been raised regarding road safety around children wandering off to buy beach items and crossing a road on a bend, there are no requirements for this, as the unit will be parked alongside the pavement, and these concerns can no more be attributed to this trader than any other. The responsibility of ensuring the safety of a child sits with the parents or carers. The hazards of water, a road and venues selling items that are appealing to children already exist in this location, and therefore the granting of a consent poses no further or greater risk. Congestion of the pavement is a factor that Island Roads officers have considered when granting permission for trading to take place. Mr. Thornton has previously stated and confirmed again today that the footway is more than wide enough for people wanting to make a purchase and to still have space for others to freely pass by. And you've already been advised that the street furniture policy requires a distance of 1.5 metres to be made available for people to pass tables and chairs that are placed on the pavement, as this is considered a sufficient distance to allow pedestrians, including those with prams or in wheelchairs, to pass safely. In this case, there is no furniture taking up space on the pavement, and therefore the full 3.3 metres remains available. In relation to litter, conditions placed on all street trading consents require traders to keep, maintain and leave their trading locations in a clean and tidy location. Conditions also require that any waste arising from the activities of the consent holder shall be removed from the site on a daily basis and disposed of in an approved manner. No trader can be held responsible for the actions of any individual who is accountable in their own right if they choose to engage in antisocial behaviour by discarding litter or by parking illegally. The applicant has also confirmed that she'll be providing a litter bin and will be carrying out spot checks throughout the day, as well as providing a choice of edible ice cream tubs. In respect of visual impact, the proposed trading location does not impede any residents' view of the Solent, as it is proposed to be sited opposite an unoccupied area of woodland. The pod itself is in very good condition, and in terms of visual impact, officers do not consider it in any way to be a negative addition to the seafront. Members are reminded that under the Isle of Wight Council Street Trading Policy 2022 to 2024, need and competition are not factors to be considered when determining street trading applications. The committee should assess the impact of the grant of this application when making its decision on public safety, prevention of crime and disorder, prevention of public nuisance, protection of children from harm and visual impact. Local opposition or support in whatever form for a proposal is not in itself grounds for refusing or granting a licensing permission, unless that opposition or support is based upon valid reasons and concerns which can be sustained. Officers from multiple services have considered the objections raised and provided further comments and assessments in order to afford members an accurate appraisal of this proposal. It's important to note that under the relevant legislation, there is no right of appeal against the grant or refusal of a street trading consent. Officers do, however, have powers to vary conditions or revoke the consent at any time should circumstances and evidence warrant such action. It therefore remains the view of the licensing team that a street trading consent should be granted in accordance with the application and subject to the standard conditions. And members should also note that you could, if you wished or were minded to, grant permission for the applicant to trade at either location. Thank you. Or both.
Thank you. Thank you very much. The subcommittee and Vanguard will now retire in private session to make its determination. And we will, of course, return as soon as practically possible. Thank you. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for your patience. The committee has made its determination and I'd just like to hand over to Gurnard, who will read out the relevant information. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. This is at a licensing subcommittee held on Friday, 22nd of March 2024. In respect of an application for street trading consent for the Salty Siren at Prince's Esplanade, Gurnard on the Isle of Wight. 4 councillors, Michael Beston, the chairman, Debbie Andre and Jonathan Bacon. Upon receiving the report of the licensing section, oral and or written evidence from the applicant, objectors, town and parish councils and the local member, and having regard to the Isle of Wight Council's Street Trading Policy 2022, the subcommittee hereby grant the street trading consent in accordance with the application in respect of both the preferred locations shown marked position 1 on the plan attached to the committee report at Appendix 2 and the alternative location shown marked position 2 on the plan attached to the committee report marked at Appendix 2, subject to the standard conditions. In reaching the above decision, the subcommittee have had regard to the Human Rights Act 1998 and in particular Article 1 of the first protocol, Article 8 and Article 6. The subcommittee consider this decision is proportionate and necessary. There is no right of appeal against this decision. If any person is dissatisfied with this decision, they should seek their own independent legal advice. That being your decision today, Chairman, I ask you to sign and date that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you all for your attendance today. That now concludes the licensing hearing. Thank you.